the children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean man, the Caribbean man, the Caribbean.
We're continuing conversations of climate change and how we can be part of that conversation, this time focusing on youth, climate and labor justice campaigns brought to you by the Caribbean Feminist. We're going to tell you who exactly that is, and to do that, Sapphire Alexander, the founder of Caribbean Feminist, joins us, as well as Princess Avianne Charles, the project lead for Redefining Work Project. Good morning, ladies, and welcome to the Now.
Good morning.
I am glad that we had that previous conversation to give a bit of context, because we sometimes forget that climate change is an ongoing challenge that many persons need to be involved in, including the youth. But before we get into the actual project that will tell us how, tell me a little bit as to who is the Caribbean Feminist.
Amazing. That's such an incredible question. So Caribbean Feminist is a digital advocacy platform that was founded in about 2014, and it provides an avenue for young people to be engaged in gender justice. So we do digital and in-person activities at the intersection of different issues. One of our core areas is climate justice, which we'll talk about today, but we also look at issues of period poverty. We also look at LGBTQIA+ rights and different areas and avenues around those intersections. So
okay, so then we understand where it impacts everybody, just taking it from that perspective. Now then, how do we come to deciding this time around, this is where we're going to put the focus? I guess I will start with you, Princess.
Yes, so in 2023, I came up with the idea that I wanted to do something more. I am a former volunteer with Caribbean Feminist, and my background is actually in occupational safety and health. So over time, I kept seeing this similar pattern when it comes to safety, where there are things that are in place, but at times it's not reinforced. And then for some workers, they don't have the tools or resources. So I came with the connection that for talking with Sapphire, that we believe it's essential that we do more in regard to connecting these dots for workers, understanding that they too are impacted by climate change, but we also want it to be done through a gender responsive lens. And we also want to account for how marginalized workers specifically are impacted by the climate crisis.
Around the globe, marginalized persons are impacted by climate change more adversely. We definitely know that. But when we're talking about in the workplace specifically, what does that look like?
So it varies because, of course, there are different demographics of people. We can talk about migrant workers. We can talk about workers who are women. As you had mentioned, for some of the previous work and the work that we continue to do with Caribbean Feminists, you can talk about LGBTQ folks who are also workers, and they can face different and more severe treatments and effects from climate change based on the accessibility to resources, as well as what protections are in place, accounting for the disparities that they already face. So in that regard, there is an intersectionality that we look at, because those are persons who may be in agriculture. Those are persons who are working regularly on the street as vendors. Those are persons who have a different level of exposure, and we have to also account for what tools and what strategies are in place to not only affect their ability to work, but to also challenge the disparities and inequities that they also face.
Take a breath. Because not just saying it is a lot, but it is a lot to do. It is a lot to do. And so in terms of the actions that we can take now, what does that actually look like? What are some of the key activities that you have engaged for, well, specifically to begin to address some of those inequalities and challenges?
So we take a really holistic approach with this campaign, because we recognize that it's not just about advocacy, but it's also about education, awareness, and training. So one of the core components of our campaign has been leading training workshops for general workers and the general public on how to identify climate hazards and risks. We focus often on heat, because that's one of the greatest hazards that we face here in the Caribbean. Exactly. We actually had a workshop this weekend where we brought general workers, union representatives, etc. together to understand how to create heat action plans and heat illness prevention plans in their own workplaces. In addition to that, we've also led some incredible youth-led research with our team of 16 volunteers. So they've been putting together articles and research, and we launched a community survey to get a better understanding of how workers here in Trinidad and Tobago are impacted by climate hazards and risks.
I appreciate that because it gives a lot of context, and I wonder if that is something that is accessible to the public, the research and the findings specifically, Sapphire.
Yes, exactly. So if you would like to learn more about the research that we're doing or to fill out our survey, these are all available on our website and our Instagram at Caribbean Feminist. So those resources are readily available for folks to interact with, give research feedback on our surveys, and provide their insights and stories so that we can really strengthen our campaign.
Strengthening the campaign is one thing, but also strengthening your focus, because I imagine from that you get feedback as to where we could probably prioritize in this long list of things that we could and need to do. So thus far, have you found any specific areas that we need to shift focus or continue to focus on, perhaps?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, because that is what actually informed why we decided to do a heat action workshop in the first place. Because when we were looking through our research findings, we found that for most workers, heat stress was one of the biggest issues that they identified. And in addition to that, almost, I think, over 80% of our respondents shared that they had not received climate hazard and risk assessment training at their jobs. So we said we need to prioritize training in our advocacy and in our platforms.
Well, at least we know exactly where to start, and we've started in a place that everybody can identify with. Because Lord knows when that AC goes down, ready to go home, productivity is impacted. We'll immediately see the impacts of any sort of change, any sort of education and awareness, that we can actually make it much more measurable. And in that case, the changes and protections that we hope to see, what does that look like? What does that sound like, perhaps?
For me, I envision that, and I envisioned it immediately when I thought about redefining work on this project. I envision it as, one, a deeper focus on policy, because not many places have a worker policy enacted, or if they do, it's not reinforced. We also had a lot of concerns with how workers receive that type of training and understanding on what they have in place as in terms of safety. We did find with the survey as well that not many persons are aware that they even have a safety legislation in place. So they don't even know what their rights are, what their rights to safer spaces look like. And these are the things that we want a core focus on, but we want more considerations as it relates to climate as well. Because we need to also understand that there are risks. We can talk about chemical risks, we can talk about slip and falls, we can talk about trips, but it also includes climate risks that are very prevalent within our country and the Caribbean as a whole. So we want more educational factors involved. We want a stronger focus on policy, and we would also like for employers to also make that deeper consideration that there are things that they can put in place once it's accessible to them, and once they have the resources to do so, workers should be a top priority, and that should be the core focal point. Regardless if you have 2 workers or you have 25, if you have more than that, they should be a core focal point in terms of ensuring that you're keeping them safe and protected from climate risk and any other risk.
Anything in life, employees need to be given some sort of priorities, and I appreciate that. I'm curious as to how it's being received both from the employer and employee perspective, especially because it's coming from a younger generation. We talked about the fact that it is, or titled it, Youth Climate and Labour Justice Campaign, but the working class or the working population would not necessarily just be youth.
Correct.
Sapphire, what has been the response thus far?
So, interestingly, the response has been largely positive. And so we've gotten a lot of support, especially from the unions recently, for our campaign and for the fact that young people are getting engaged in the labour movement. We're actually going to be at the Labour March tomorrow with union representatives sharing the word and the message on our campaign. So I can hopefully and gladly say that we've gotten some really good feedback from folks on our campaign so far.
Well, let me congratulate you then. That's not an easy feat, and I know this is just the start of so much work that has to be done and will continue to be done in terms of the public getting involved, workforce or not. Apart from that Labour March, how else can we connect with you guys?
So in addition to seeing us at the Labour March, if you're there, you can also find more information about our campaign on our website, Caribbean Feminist, or on any of our social media platforms. We're on Instagram, we're on X, we're on TikTok, if you're there, sharing the word about labour and climate justice.
They make it sound easy, but these ladies are doing the good work as we continue to give you the information, and you can be part of the change that we need to see. So thank you both for joining us this morning on The Now.
Thank you.
Hydrate when you get to that march. I want it to be good, but for now, we are heading to a break, and we'll come back with more here on The Now Morning Show. Stick around.
Before Labor Day was established, workers in Trinidad and Tobago faced racism, low wages, and harsh conditions. Strikes and protests erupted, demanding fair pay and better working conditions.